powering trusted identities of the world's people, places, and things. Every day, millions of people in more than 100 countries use our products and services to securely access physical and digital places. Over 2 billion things that need to be identified, verified, and tracked are connected through HID Global's technology.
Welcome back, Don. How you doing?
Oh, not bad. How have you been?
Good. So, by the way, did you finish the construction? Because hammers and nail guns can get kind of loud, I noticed.
I think so. They're not here today, so it should be quieter. We'll see. Probably be the dog that disturbs us this time.
Such is life in a pandemic, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Last time you and I talked about identities and kind of management of those as really a critical piece of PIAM, being identity. I wanted to chat now about the AM portion of that acronym, the access management portion. And, an observation from some of the conversations I've had is it seems like a lot of the challenges customers are having really center around the concept of, for instance, I have 5 buildings or I have 5 offices. Each one of those offices, the system to get into them, the physical access system, it's different in each one of those. So I've got inconsistencies across locations or policies. And, it feels like as the solution provider, there's something we'd be able to do to help that, taking kind of from the IT world, like maybe even an abstraction layer across those that really kind of help with centralization and standardization. Am I thinking down the right path here with access management and how we alleviate some of the challenges our customers have?
Yeah, for sure. That's going down the right path, though. Not only is it trying to manage multiple systems and access there, but it's even more about capturing the approval process. Like, what is the process that we go through to figure out who's meant to have access, where, why, and who authorized it?
Okay, so then if I'm thinking about back to 5 buildings, 5 different offices, that's probably done highly manually today. But if I'm thinking about putting it into a system that kind of centralizes that, is this an efficiency quotient or is it more around accuracy and error reduction?
It's both. Again, efficiency is certainly part of it, though at the end of the day, getting faster is good. It makes life easier for us and makes our jobs easier. But it's really the error reduction. If you look across what we'll see typically in a system is if you're doing things manually, you might introduce errors in maybe 10% of records, but it's that rate grows as you start to talk about the number of systems and number of places where you're transcribing things. And you may introduce a misspelling, you may end up leaving off a piece. And it actually, when you start talking about people with 3, 4, 5 systems, like HR to IT to a couple of PACS systems, and with multiple stakeholders, it's not how many of the identities have errors, it's how many errors you have per identity as they start to accumulate.
Yeah.
So some of those are just nuisances, like, I don't know, they spell my name wrong or demote me in my title. They never seem to promote me. Or, as long as they pay me correctly, I think I don't complain about that too much. But then some of those have consequences. You may see something where a person is duplicated, they've changed jobs, but we're not really sure is this person in the marketing department the same person who previously was in sales. And maybe we end up with 2 records, 2 cards. One of them is actually, an orphaned record that doesn't belong to a person anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we'll reduce the burden on whoever's doing some of this administration, ergo eliminating some of the errors that come about. Just by human nature, incidentally happens, but also really capturing what's happening, who's authorized this, which, being able to track these things, these instances, these transactions, the wrong word, but these records over time allows us to now really focus those compliance efforts, really think about how we're capturing and codifying rules and controls and things like that. Is codified kind of the right word? Or it feels like there's got to be some way of doing that, right?
Yeah, and so it's back to our policy engine again. It's
okay.
In this case, policy is typically considered the workflow.
Yeah.
But the policy and the steps it's going to walk you through in a system like this is capturing, okay, in this area, who's the area owner? Is it a one-step approval, or is it 2 or 3 steps? Perhaps your manager has to authorize before you can request it. The area owner has to grant it. You may have different rules for different areas. For maybe a manufacturing area, you need to have the right safety training in place. For another area, it might be about insurance. For someplace else, it might be, you're part of this team, or you've gone through the correct approval process. And so you have a series of rules, but it's gathering up the requirements so that what we're doing is we're making sure we're enforcing the things we've written down. We're enforcing the rules that we've set for ourselves before we allow that to happen. And of course, now if I try to grant access outside of those rules, the system will stop and prevent that and ask if this is something you want to request from that approver, rather than allowing you to just accidentally grant access that's inappropriate.
Yeah, that seems like, sort of unrelated to the pandemic, actually, for once. There's been a number of high-profile security incidences that have information and physical security teams scrambling really probably at a global scale. But some of what you're talking about is also interesting, because then it's going to help those individuals comply with any number of governance requirements, internal, external, but also implement something more least privilege oriented, which will probably also help from just a security footing over time. So really interesting to think about how access management's playing that sort of role now.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, we are seeing this coming from supplier agreements and other types of things that, as we partner with other companies, we need to tighten up our rules and make sure that we stick with them. I know that we've been expanding our compliance program really rapidly over the last few years. But I do think we've seen things change. Before people used to think of security as a little static. This person in this role has these rights. They go to these places, and their requests, they would come in from time to time. But for the most part, a typical person isn't making that many requests. I think in our systems, we would see that maybe 30 to 40% of people in a really dynamic company have an access request at all in any given calendar year. Well, that's completely flipped. And part of that is like you're saying, least access permissions, but also because the rules keep changing. So we're now actually seeing that it's not 30 to 40% of people, it's all people. The process of changes, the data that you want to collect before you grant access has flipped from, safety training or insurance to health questionnaires and vaccine records, and things like that. And honestly, it's changing every 6 months. So where it used to be a fraction of the employees, it's now everybody.
Yep. Well, and that brings us to maybe a topic for next time. Actually, a couple of topics for next time. The dynamic nature of things is an interesting one to just kind of riff on maybe later. But I also think it gets us to, how's that made manifest in the plastic that I used to get into said building or into said cage or something to that effect. So I think let's leave it at that. I appreciate the chat, Don, as always. Enjoyed it. So we'll leave it there. Thanks,
Great.
Don.
Yeah, talk to you soon.